Originally called the Dollar Bills when they formed in 1962 with the brothers Pete and John Cruikshank being the creators. After they met McPhee, he suggested that they rename the band to John Lee Hooker's song Groundhog Blues. And then a little bit further down the line, they backed John Lee Hooker in 1964. But eventually they, after the release of the first album, Scratching the Surface, they became the Groundhogs. And they were a four-piece at that particular time, with Polsternet having joined on drums. And they had a harmonica player, Steve Rye, who sadly died and in 1992, but he didn't stay around very long. They released Blues Obituary in '69, their second, and the album that I'm going to review today is their third, Thank Christ for the Bomb. Now, I have to confess that at that particular time of release, 1970, I was seeing this band on regular occasions at my Sunday haunt, my infamous music club, the Mad Jim Mill Club, where basically music became a part of my life. And I also saw them in a slightly larger venue in Guildford at the Civic Hall. So I became pretty familiar with this album and the next album, Split. So this is my take on Thank Christ for the Bomb. This is with the Powerhouse Trio, Tony McPhee, Pete Cruikshank and Ken Polsternet. Point worth noting is that the engineer on this album, Martin Birch, later became responsible for the smash hit Deep Purple in Rock, which I wasn't aware of, but it's worth noting that. So the opening cut on Thank Christ for the Bomb is Strangetown. Hard-driven bass by Cruikshank and drums from Polsternet enables the riff to be heavy. McPhee's artistry on lead it varies with delicate and dedicated solos. It's a heavy rhythmic song and squeals with wah-wah solos. Strangetown packs it all in, and the squealing heavy sound of the blues rock sound is clear to hear as the pace and we hear the overdubs rightly reminding us that Tony S. McPhee is a master of work on the blues guitar. Strangetown lyrics really a message to people who need to open their eyes to what's important in life, rather than working for that pension when you're old and grey and always moaning about gossip with regard to others. It's sort of a message about living rather than getting sidetracked, and get on with it. Up next is Darkness Is No Friend. It skips in with the neat chord rhythm patterns, and Polsternet's drums punch out a tight platform, and McPhee squirts out short rasping solos as the vocals are more hearsay. The change of tempo enables McPhee to experiment with his solo virtuosity before and after his Hendrix impersonation. He rejoins his rhythm mates to wind up to the climax. Track 3 is a real beauty. It's called Soldier. It's calmer, more melodic, and a lengthy 5 minutes plus, a rarity for the Groundhogs. And it's got some really cool lead work with much more atmosphere and less ferocity, really delicately played, and on top of Cruikshank's lead bass, and there's a second guitar overdub walling together in a tub of psychedelia. And 5-star playing continues with a hint of San Francisco psychedelia. A real great song. Lyrics to Soldier then. Very cryptic, I thought. probably reflecting on, well, it could be many wars, but certainly reference to the king, suggesting it some time back, and fixing that bayonet. And the fact is, once you're in that position, you might as well go forward, because if you retreat as a coward, you're going to end up being shot anyway, or bayoneted, and so you're stuck basically, and you have to see the enemy for what they are, and get all negative about them. To end the first side, we have Thank Christ for the Bomb. Starts out a jaunty acoustic shanty-like folk rendition, and then T.S. sings us through the history of warfare from the turn of the 20th century until that fateful day in 1945. There's some terrific acoustic guitar on this, thanking the bomb for a delicate piece. And at 2.5 minutes, the band usher in the electric section with the bass bridging us to McPhee's subdued rhythm guitar repetition of the chords, and slowly ratcheting up the volume, and then all hell lets loose with feedback overdose and a maze of electric soloing that is reminiscent of a firestorm, as it links to a crescendo of Hendrix-influenced annihilation of the senses. And then amidst the feedback, it cuts to the siren and then ends with a big explosion. Very creative. Lyrics to Thank Christ for the Bomb, it's a history lesson, but basically starting with World War I and the first verse, and then into World War II for the second, and then the finality of the bomb being dropped and the sound effects to that at the end. And thanks to the fact that we achieved peace and just averted that calamity. The opening cut on side 2 is Ship on the Ocean. Cruikshank's bass is all power behind slick McPhee chord changes, and McPhee maintains a busy take on the lead chord rhythms, and then bursts out his crashing lead solos, which impress even though the song is quite ordinary. Lyrics to Ships on the Ocean, really it's about a person who's materially okay, but his mind, he's got problems there. He can't really get stable, and he's constantly challenging himself to try and stabilise his thinking, but he hasn't really got a plan, and he's wondering whether he ought to go back to where he began. Track 6 is Garden. This is a beautifully mid-paced ballad style rock song. It lulls you in, and then McPhee's vocals are as good as it gets for him. The pace quickens up, and then the power blast in before recycling the lead intro. But some of the high-pitched solos are exceptional. Tony does like the solid style feedback, but he can certainly get up and get to the summit in those guitar moments. The guitar's almost like another singer, really, like a violin at times. I'm always impressed by this track, and it's a touch over 5 minutes. Give it a listen. Another song about neglecting. This is Garden. It reflects on allowing the garden to get a bit of a mess, really, and how this is the way that you prefer to live your life. Basically, before the age of the agricultural revolution or the industrial revolution, back to how it looked at the beginning, full of wildness, and the fact that you are not going to be pulled into the materialistic society, and you're going to look for food from bins, clothes from heaps, and water from ponds, etc. And tramps is the best alternative. Interesting how he's had a number of songs here about people who live a lifestyle like a tramp or a down and out. Very much the way he sometimes looked on stage. On to track 7 now is Status People. Standard blues riff here. Tight drums and bass typify the cuts on the album, really, with Cruikshank's bass more like a lead lick. It sounds darker and best played loud, more restrained by TS on the track, however. Another song about being rich and discarding, well, not discarding it, but opting for the opposite of a lifestyle. That's Status People. Closing your doors, letting the brass and silver collect grime, and being philanthropic, giving your money away, and sort of looking towards steering away from those people obsessed by status. That's Status People for you. Track 8's Rich Man, Poor Man. More of the same, really, with a quicker pace, but it's still the same song. Power chords certainly predominate. In fact, it is best played very loud, and it saves the track with more trickery on that Stratocaster from TS. And so we reach the finality, the finale, Eccentric Man, and it's a powerhouse rock blues. It really does go at a hell of a pace, and it's a favourite of mine. Very popular on their live sets. Great extended lead work, and the recurring rhythm is hypnotic, and it launches itself into the solo. Very Hendrix influenced again. It really does exert a lot on the listening senses, however, but it was really a great live feel back there in 1970. Lyrics to Eccentric Man, well, it's a tale of a man who lives outside. He may well be a rich man, but he's chosen to sleep rough, live rough, dress rough. He's eccentric, and he lives day by day. Probably got a slight problem, but people probably misjudge him, think he's crazy. But he's got much more to him than this, because he's got the cash, but he's made a choice. And it's quite a compelling little song.